Welcome everybody to today's presentation of my paper, Dialects and Acquisition Target Selection. It is my pleasure to be part of AIB 2020 online this year. Thank you for taking the time. Let me begin in global terms. Academia and industry agrees. Mergers and acquisitions are important. In fact, in 2018, the Institute for Mergers, Acquisitions and Alliances reported that the global value of deals hit almost $4 trillion, and at the same time, research says that 70 to 90% of all deals fail, which most likely leads to the huge literature on M&A performance, with nearly 500,000 hits on Google Scholar. Culture as a driver for performance has been investigated for several decades, with only one conclusion so far: disagreement of effect direction. What in theory seems obvious, namely that a higher cultural distance between the business partners leads to lower levels of performance, is not supported empirically. For a visual exercise, we plotted the uncontrolled correlations of over 40 studies that investigate culture and M&A performance here, which shows the large disagreement in the literature. We reviewed the studies of culture as performance drivers and identified two limitations. The first one is that culture in the literature is bound by national borders. In other words, culture conflates with other national covariates, for example, formal institutions. The second limitation is characteristics of the broader literature on drivers of performance and business partnerships in general. What the literature fails to account for is that drivers of performance are known by potential partners and therefore form such partnerships with this in mind. The drivers of performance are therefore not randomly assigned in observed partnerships, and this implies a selection bias that is proportional to the strength of the driver. So how are we approaching these limitations in our paper? We first introduce a novel cultural proxy that, rather than examining discrete cultural differences between countries, we examine dimensions of culture that vary continuously within a country and smoothly across its national borders. And second, we disregard financial performance and ask how it influences whether an acquisition occurs at all. The study focuses on German dialects, a proxy for culture that varies within the country of Germany and Austria, but also across its shared national border. We identified other facets of culture that are highly likely correlating with our proxy. Remember, the goal of this study is to isolate culture from other covariates. And so we conceptualize our propositions in the following. We expect our cultural proxies to impact the probability of an acquisition negatively, while controlling for formal institutions, synergies, and transaction costs. Coming to our empirical specifications, our sample consists of 1,954 realized deals and a total of over 1.4 million hypothetical combinations of matches. We then, by means of a probit model, regressed our cultural proxies and controls on the probability of an acquisition match being equal to 1, or in other words, the probability that the combination of acquirer and target actually happened. Please note, detailed descriptions of our data, measurements, and robustness checks can be found in the appendix of this presentation. We first calculated the baseline probability, which is 0.15%. We then calculated the probability for our cultural proxies based on the baseline probability by dividing the average marginal effects by such probability. We standardized our distance measures, so the interpretations of our findings are as follows. A 1 standard deviation increase in dialect distance leads to a 45.47% decrease in acquisition probability in our German sample. We tested our cultural proxies individually first. We then tested all 4 cultural proxies together in column 6 and added geographic distance in column 7. We see here that dialect distance and religious distance remain relatively robust when tested together. But note the drop in magnitude for geographic distance from almost 50% to 7.5%. The last table we see is the full controlled models, column 1 for the German sample and then column 2 for the international sample. Dialect distance and religious distance remain significant. They drop by another 10 and 8% respectively. As mentioned before, formal institutions and industry distance are indeed important. Their associations are considerably large and robust. However, note also here that geographic distance is subsumed by our cultural proxies and formal institutions entirely. So what can we conclude from the paper so far? We show here that culture in fact matters, as we are not surprised, but we show that it matters on both levels, within and across national borders. To summarize, we show that a 1 standard deviation in dialect distance, as one of our cultural proxies, decreases the acquisition match probability by 24% within Germany and 26% in our international sample. And now I would like to finish up with a practical example. Based on our results, we can now say the following. Let's assume a firm headquartered in Munich has two options to acquire a company: controlling for formal institutional differences, including the national border and industry relatedness. The chance for the firm to choose the target in Vienna, which is abroad, over the target firm in Berlin, which is still in Germany, is 1.39 times higher. Thank you very much for your time.